Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Luke Wyatt, will talk about the disaster that was the Tennessee game this weekend and look a little bit ahead to next season for football. Luke appears on the guest line. That's presented by Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group. Michael is a local carpenter and a lifelong Vandy fan. He builds bookshelves, cabinets, picture frames, furniture, and made-to-order items, including a display case for my prized Dale Murphy jersey. I've seen Michael's work. He's a true craftsman. If you're in the market for custom woodwork, give Michael a call at 615-830-9458. Now on to our episode with Luke Wyatt. Luke Wyatt joins us today. It's Monday morning. Vanderbilt had a very disappointing blowout loss to Tennessee over the weekend in the rain amidst a sea of orange. Luke, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, good morning. We talked about the two ways it could have gone, and unfortunately it went that way. I said if we're down 21 or so at halftime, it's over with, and they'll have their fun, and it'll be a long night, which it was. Again, I was a little disappointed with our turnout. I felt like, there's obviously some of our fans, for some reason, just don't want to sit with Tennessee fans, and I kind of get part of that. The other night, by the way, was my first time I've ever sat in the stands for Vanderbilt versus Tennessee in my life. And now I know what our fans hate about it. But anyway, nonetheless, we should have had more people show up. Unless you were sick or whatever, I know the stadium was not full. It was sold out, but that the entire side over there by the student section was empty. There was probably, in my guesstimation, if there was 36,000 there, Chris, didn't you think probably 28,000 Tennessee, 8,000 Vanderbilt would be what my guess would be?
It maybe. It was hard to tell because you'll have some Tennessee fans that'll wear black too. So,
right.
There's a lot of black and orange in there. And it was overwhelmingly Tennessee. The noise those fans made when they hit the field was the loudest that I've heard it in the press box all year. I mean, it was almost deafening through the windows. And that had to be demoralizing.
Well, that's why I said you have senior night against Florida. That's the exact reason. Because, as I said, Vanderbilt's the only school that I know of. Now, I think Wake Forest has this problem when they play a Clemson, or Duke does when they play a Clemson or Florida State. But it's about one of the few places in the country where you just don't have home field advantage. I think we had home field advantage against Elon and maybe Wake Forest, maybe, I can't remember, and that's it. So these kids are playing neutral site games at best, and it's a shame. It's sad, and that's where our athletic department got to get off the rear end and figure something out. I don't care if it costs a lot of money. There's ways to keep them out. There is, and it's going to cost Vanderbilt money, and they're not willing to do that. They'll just take their money.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because that's the thing that I really wanted to discuss today. We'll get into the game a little bit. I don't know how much you can dissect a 56-point loss that anybody, as a Vanderbilt fan listening to this audience, would want to hear. There were some things I wanted to get to for the game, but I just think that this is where their lack of having any kind of season ticket strategy, fan retention, or anything. Look, Tennessee fans were going to be there in greater number than Vanderbilt fans anyway, I think.
Right.
But, okay, so you get 2,000 more Vanderbilt fans in the building, or 3,000 or 5,000. You'll see you get 5,000 more in the building, which is not unrealistic. That's 5,000 fewer Tennessee fans. It starts to really flip. I mean, you know the stories as well as I know, and you could probably share some of how longtime season ticket holders have just had their nose thumbed by the university towards them. That's horrible grammar, but you know what I'm saying. There's not in any way, shape, or form any kind of a coherent season ticket and fan retention strategy that I can see. Now, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's part of the problem is that was decided months ago, probably before the season even started, in the way that the school, and I'm not blaming any particular individual. I don't know who in that ticket office does or doesn't do a good job because I'm never buying tickets. I'm coming on a press pass. And I know there are good stories from time to time over there, but it is a systematic failure and a lack of vision that has existed for I don't even know how long.
Well, let me just stop one thing. It's not the ticket office. It's not Michael West. I know Michael.
Right.
Michael does a tremendous job, and he's a great guy. He cares, okay? He's just following marching orders by the athletic department, by the athletic director and whoever else may be working on a daily basis with the ticket situation. I don't know the logistics of it. I can tell you this, though, and I can't remember if it was Paul Houlihan or who. One of our athletic directors said, we were playing Tennessee, and we're not going to have a full house of Tennessee fans. And it worked. I don't know what they did exactly. I know they had to get a ticket, so supposedly you had to be on a season ticket package and all that. But when we played Tennessee that year, it was not near as bad as it was the other night. Not even close. Not even close. Now, let me say this. Tennessee, when they think they're going to beat you, will show up. And they think, if you remember when Franklin was here, remember what the crowd was like the night we beat them 41-18?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So there you go. They're not going to show up. That's who they are. That's their identity. But but they were angry because what had just happened to them with Hooker going down, and they got embarrassed at South Carolina, so they wanted to take it out on Vanderbilt, which they did a good job of. That's fine, whatever. But that's the problem. You've got to foresee that stuff. We knew going into the season that our football team is in a major rebuild, and they have a dynamic offense, and they had a quarterback that those people want to watch. You got to do something about it. But again, it will cost Vanderbilt money, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's down to the dollar. Well, we're going to take their money and just. But that's not backing your kids. That's not taking care of your athletes. That's an embarrassing situation, and they got to figure something else out.
What would you do if you had strategic power over those type of decisions? Give me some things that you would do.
Well, the first thing I would do would make it be Tennessee. If you want a ticket, you're going to have to buy a season ticket. That's the first thing. Now, this is where it's our fans' problems. I saw, and I said in the bridge, there was not that many Tennessee fans in the bridge, okay? But I did see a ton of this. You see one Vanderbilt fan, and they got 3 Tennessee fans with them. These are their friends. That's fine. But do you think those Tennessee fans are taking Vanderbilt people to Neyland with them? No, it's just where our fans do that. Our fans are just that way because their priorities in life are not just living on, or they don't live for those 3 hours on a Saturday like the Tennessee fans do. That's your other problem. And that's not the athletic department's fault. I get that. If Joe that's in the Commodore Club buys 4 season tickets and the Tennessee game, he says, well, I'll let my 3 Tennessee friends go with me. Joe, in my opinion, shouldn't be a Vanderbilt fan because what you're doing is bringing 3 people to cheer against the team you support and those kids that have worked hard, and you're going to bring in other people to cheer against them. I would never. If my mother and dad were still alive and they were Tennessee fans, they would never go with me to a Vanderbilt game. That's just the way it is. That's the way I feel about it. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I am. But that's the second thing that needs to happen. And the third thing is, I don't know how you can, when Lucy Jones was in charge of tickets, when Roy Kramer was here, when we needed fans, she would go to Trevecca, Lipscomb, Belmont, and say, hey, we're giving you free tickets, but you got to show up, and we got to cheer for Vanderbilt. If you show up with Tennessee stuff on, you're not getting in at the gate. That type of thing. And it worked. It worked great. Now, that was before the Titans and before the Predators. So that's part of that. But that's what I would do. If you got to give away tickets to keep them out for that one game, take the financial loss and do it. I think it's because they don't want to take the financial loss.
Yeah, and look, I know when I went to Lipscomb, I would remember they would be handing out tickets to games in the student center. Somebody from Vanderbilt would come over and do that. I know a family or two that became Vanderbilt fans for that. I mean, when your fan base is almost nothing, you've got to do something. A. B, the other thing that I hear, and I see it on my board constantly, is I'd been a season ticket holder for fill in the blank amount of decades, and then we didn't renew, and I never got a call from anybody at the school, blah, blah, blah. That's the other story that you see a lot.
Yes, and that's a huge failure on Vanderbilt's part. Part of this, listen, and I'm not saying this because I was there for 40 years. I understand I was a rare breed. I was a lifer at Vanderbilt. People don't do that anymore. They don't go places and work their entire working career at one place. Okay, I get that. But you have to have people in that athletic department that care about Vanderbilt athletics. They're not there just to take a paycheck. And unfortunately, that's what happens at Vanderbilt. They're fans of whoever else they are. I'm not going to mention the person's name, but there's a prominent person in the Commodore Club that went to the University of Tennessee. And I know he's a UT fan. Why is he involved? There's too many other choices. Nothing against him. Not trying to get anybody's job lost. But why is he involved in Vanderbilt athletics? Do you think that would happen at the University of Tennessee?
No, there's not a coherent strategy with stuff, and there hasn't been for a long time. It's everything that they do athletically is generally reactionary.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
it's one of those. It's one of those things too, Chris, that where until you bang loud enough, and again, and I know things are changing. I hate to go back to what's happened in the past. I know they're trying. Daniel Dearmeyer, at least, is trying his best. By the way, I stood beside him during the team walk the other night and introduced myself for the very first time, and he was very gracious and seemed like a nice fella. But anyway, as we're sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, we got a chancellor standing here cheering as the band and the team walks by. We got someone who cares for a change. Now's when we have to strike while the iron's hot. If we don't do it with Daniel Dearmeyer, it ain't never happening.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I met him. They were bringing him through the press box. Oh, I guess this is right after the second half had started. I met him briefly. It's the first time I'd ever met him. He was a nice man, and I hope I wasn't rude. I didn't have time to do much. I was in the middle of trying to write, and so it was kind of more like I turned around over my left shoulder, said hello, and that was about it. But yeah, I mean, they have to figure something out there, and they're in a spot where. Well, and look, let's face it too, okay? 2 or 3 years from now, capacity in that place is probably going to be closer to 30,000. That's where you can really leverage this. If you can somehow get 17,000, 18,000 season ticket holders in that building, you should have the advantage for every game. And I mean, and that hasn't happened in I don't know how many years. I mean, I guess it's been a decade since Franklin was here that you went to a game and there were more Vandy fans in the building than anybody else's.
You know, I mentioned it last week. We have about 15,000 Vanderbilt football fans that are, I mean, I'm not talking about in the country. I'm talking about around Nashville and Middle Tennessee area that will come to a Vanderbilt football game. They won't come to all of them, but I'm saying there's 15,000 out there you can get to every game. If you work your butt off and you have a good marketing strategy, you can get 15,000 people in there for every home game. You know, I don't know the exact answer. And again, I'm not blaming individuals, but I'm blaming either the athletic department or on campus. They all got to care enough to try to do something about this.
Yeah, and you've got to start building the fan base young too, and doing things with outreach with schools. I went to, oh goodness, they had it was a Tuesday a couple of weeks ago. They had their annual women's game when they invite kids in from public schools, and that was a good thing. I don't know how many kids are going to come back to women's basketball games, but it gives you a chance to get people on campus and start building a fan base. I think I've said this. I don't remember if I've said this on the podcast with you, but I think one of the bigger things they should do and this is where you see leadership really get its batteries charged. I think they should build some sort of an African-American sports museum on campus, given their tie to Perry Wallace. You could invite every school in the city and the surrounding counties there for a day, feed them, give them shirts, whatever. I mean, you could start building a fan base that way, and that's what the school really loves to do anyway. The school loves to promote that into things. I'm not saying that's wrong. I think they've got a great history, and they were on the right side there. You've got to find something to leverage when you don't have winning on your side. That's something they've always been excited about promoting. I think that right there is a gateway to a fan base that they could start building. It's going to cost money, but the school's got it. The school loves to tell that story. I mean, why not, right? This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing, it's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible.
I agree with you 100%. And that's not the only thing they can do. There's other areas. Like I said, to me, the Lipscomb, Belmont, Trevecca, bringing them over. Heck, that's what used to make up our band, was Lipscomb students, Belmont students, and it may still, I don't know. But it used to make up our entire band nearly. So why not go over there? If you can get 3,000 more people in that would cheer for Vanderbilt because they got in free and you gave them a free hot dog or pizza or whatever, you're telling me it's not worth it?
Well, and you have so many storylines in this community around, black sports and things like that, back to the Nashville Stars baseball team, to the things at TSU. I mean, I just think that's a thing that you can use as a rallying point that I think everybody can get on board with. I think it'd be awesome. If they ever do it, I'll go to the groundbreaking and all those things. I just think that is an idea there that I don't know that it's ever been explored, but you got to find something like that to tap into, that you can get the community there for, and that you could get the school excited about. And I just think that checks all the boxes.
I agree with you. I just know for a fact there's got to be more done, and there can be more done.
Yeah. The game, I'll be honest, I thought the staff did a really good job this year. I mean, I will say what I've said since before the beginning of the season. I thought if he won 4 games, he ought to be in consideration for Coach of the Year honors. Well, they won 5 and had a chance in a couple more. So I think, yes, the losses were ugly, and there's no getting around that. I don't care. It doesn't change what I think about it. Now, I do think this. I thought their game plan was awful. If you're going to start Mike Wright, I mean, and this is what a kind of a theme throughout the year. I don't understand why Mike wasn't involved in more called runs. You knew the way to attack Tennessee was to go after it downfield, and that's with a healthy secondary, which it did not have, decidedly did not have. I don't know why you choose the game plan you choose, and that game was, if it wasn't over already at halftime, which it probably was, when you come out, you get good field position, you take 4 plays, they're all runs. I don't think any of them were designed Mike Wright runs that I remember. You turn it over on downs right there. They didn't take a shot downfield, I think, until about 20 minutes left in the game. They might have been one, but I did not at all understand what they were doing offensively, and they had no shot to win with that game plan.
Here's the way I look at it. I have no problem with Mike Wright starting and you trying to keep your identity on. You just won 2 football games, okay? And as a coach, think about this. Okay, they look Tennessee, Florida. When Tennessee played Florida, that's it. Athletically, Florida's close to Tennessee. Tennessee's got faster receivers and all that, more of them. Tennessee beat Florida 38-33. We beat Florida 31-24. Very similar games. So they're thinking in their mind, well, maybe we can do the same thing that we did against Florida. Okay, but once you see, here's my thing. And let me get to
Yeah, but Tennessee's run defense is a lot better than Florida's. A lot better.
I understand that. But you're trying to state your identity, okay? But once you get to 14-0 or after the punt return 21-0, you have to make a change, in my opinion.
Yes.
And I'd tell Clark that to his face right now. At 21-0, you got to make a change. It's probably too late anyway at 21-0, but you've got to make a change right then. Our players, you could see the receivers. If you watch the receivers. Go back and watch the game, and from the view where I have it, you did too. They after a while their routes that they ran, it was basically they were just running, knowing that they weren't going to get the football. You could tell it they were running 3/4 speed, and they're like, "Well, he ain't getting it to me." There's no way. So they knew when Mike was in there, and I hate to say it, but that's the way it was. And I hate it because I love Mike. I love what he's done for this team. He went 4-1 as a starter until that game. And but it was not, the matchup did not work with Mike Wright. Now, my next question is this, and I understand they didn't want to play A.J. Swan. I get it, and I get why. What is the story with Ken Seals? Why did Ken not get one shot the entire year?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
and I said this coming out of fall camp. I thought he was there, and I went to every single practice. I thought he played better than the other 2 in fall camp. I never have understood the decision to not have him at any point in the mix.
Yeah, I don't. There's got to be something we don't know and we're not privy to. And, I don't know what it would be. I really don't. And the other night was the perfect chance. Or maybe that is unfair to Mike. To Ken. Is that unfair to put him in that situation? I don't know. Down 21-0. I didn't like.
What do you have to lose? I mean, you don't lose your red shirt anymore unless you play more than 4 games. That's what I didn't get. And it's not like he's a bad teammate. I go to practice. He's out there.
No, he's great.
Yeah, I mean, you see him like he's one of the first kids who come over to congratulate teammates when they make a big play. He's one of the last guys to leave the practice field when I'm out there. I don't understand that at all.
No, what I'm saying is it fair to Ken to put him in that situation? He hadn't taken a snap all year long.
Right.
You put him in the year when you're down 21-0, and now they're going to pin their ears back and come after him. So that's what I'm saying. So you were almost damned if you do, damned if you don't there. I'm not letting it go that the coaches did a poor job. Obviously, when you get beat 56-0, when you get beat 55-0 and all that against those top teams, now understood, we're the only team in the country that played 4 teams that were top 10 teams when we played them. Nobody else in the country had to do that. I get that. And we're in the middle of a rebuild. And it's going to be ugly, at least a couple of those games. But against your in-state rival, last game of the season, you have to pull out all the stops. You have to do everything you can to at least try to make it respectable. And it wasn't respectable. And that's the part that every Vanderbilt fan has a hard time with.
Well, and that's the only thing that I can really pick a big flaw with what they've done in terms of their game planning is that the Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee games, they had no shot to win with their offensive game plans. I know what they're trying to do. I know they're trying to control the ball. They're trying to keep their defense off the field. They're trying to keep teams from scoring touchdowns in 55 seconds like Tennessee did the other night. I get that. But it didn't work. It was never going to work. They had awful offensive games in all 3 of those. I know it, you know it, and if I know it, the players know it. And I wonder if there's something in their messaging subconsciously when they approach games like that that's telling the players, we think we got no shot to win. And I get what they're trying to do, but they have been so bad. I mean, it should have not been they shouldn't have lost all three of those games by 50 points or more. And I just have to think in the offseason they've got to rethink that. Now, having said that, other than maybe Georgia, I don't know if there's a game on the schedule like that next year, but I think there's got to be some component of unintentional messaging and how they approach their games that's rubbing off on the kids and telling them, hey, our coaches think we've got no shot. Maybe that's unfair, but that's how it feels to me as I watch it.
Well, let me say this. And first of all, Ray Davis, I love that kid. And you talk about a kid who played all the way to the end of the game. That's Ray Davis. But Ray, unlike Tennessee's backs, when he breaks through the line of scrimmage, he can't take
it's not
it to the
going
house.
For 60, right?
That's right. Tennessee has two running backs that could do that, and you saw it. Part of that was our bad run fits, the fact that we had no juice left. You could tell they weren't. And people say they quit. Listen, I don't know about quitting. I don't know about that. Now, being demoralized and not doing the basic things you're supposed to do as a football player with your run fits and being in position to make a play or sticking your nose in when you know it's going to be a hard hit, yes. But we don't have a running back that can do that. With our same game plan, if we had that kid small and ran him on some of the runs with Davis, those would have been touchdowns on two or three of them. So the game plan itself would have worked if you had that personnel, but we know we don't have that personnel. That's the reason why it didn't work. It didn't. And another thing, you get what drives you crazy in a game like that, Chris, and I guess it was 28-0 at the time or 21 when we'd run the fake punt and then fumble after getting the first down.
Yeah.
That right there, you see everybody on our sideline say, "What? That's it." And it is. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, we got to keep fighting and all that rah-rah stuff. When something like that happens, as a human being, you look at each other and say, well, it ain't our night. Everything's going their way. And look, this is a team that just got 63 hung on them. 63 by South Carolina. Now, I know South Carolina's played great last 2 weeks. They just beat Clemson. But they didn't hang 63 on Clemson. It was a 1-point game against their rival. So, and Clark mentioned it at the podium, and he's correct. He said we have to own what we are as a program right now. Against the three best teams in this league, we aren't close. And those were the three best teams in the league this year. So we have to admit that. Now, let's go back again and look at the entire picture 1 through 12. Were we happy that we won 5 football games? If you're not, then you're not a Vanderbilt fan, and you don't know what you're talking about. Because 5 and 7 is the worksheet. The fact that we lost 56-0, it doesn't count for 2 losses. It counts for 1 loss. The same thing with Georgia and Alabama. Just like the win against Florida is no bigger than beating. I mean, it's bigger, but it only counts for 1 win. So we won 5 of the 12 games we played. Las Vegas had us winning what, 2.5?
2.5.
So you have to look at the entire picture and say where we came from. Look, last year, it was so bad last year. What Clark was trying to fix things inside the building and we're coaching a football team. People have no idea how low it had sunk. And you're only in the second year of it. This is not the second. Look, Heupel took over a team. You have players on the team that were getting paid money to play for the University of Tennessee before it was legal to pay them money. So you got a totally different animal. They're recruiting from an ocean. We're recruiting from a lake. It's that simple. And until you're able to build what you want and get more C.J. Taylors in there and get more Dericky Wrights and get more Ray Davises and get more A.J. Swans, when you play an elite offense, which they are, they're not an elite team. People can say Tennessee's elite all they want. Defensively, they're not elite. Offensively, they are. But when you play somebody that's really, really strong on one side of the football like that, you're going to get it handed to you until you're better. The speed difference is immense between someone mentioned this. I may have saw it on the board or I heard it in the crowd the other night. It's like a dog chasing a car.
Yeah.
When they would throw it down the field, that's what it was.
That's the one thing that I think surprises me. If you had said Okay, Chris, tell us on August the 15th, what is this going to look like by season's end? And I'm not being critical of the coaching staff here because I'm not in practice and I don't know what these guys can or can't do. And I do know that when I saw them end of August, I didn't think any of their freshman DBs, other than Jadias Richard, looked really particularly ready. But
Right.
you see this a lot of times. You see somebody jumps out of obscurity those last 3 or 4 games and starts getting a lot of reps and starting. It's usually a first or second year player, and you know it's not going to go well because you see first round corners in the NFL that start as freshmen in the SEC, and it almost even then doesn't go well, almost even no matter how talented you are. I thought that you would see, I don't know, they were all kind of fungible to me. Trudell Berry, Jamison Wharton, somebody like that step up and maybe win that corner job to end the season. That those kids didn't even play. I mean, they played some safeties. They played Richard, who was playing nickel and got burned on the Hyatt ball to start the game. So that was one, but I thought there would be more guys that would step up and join them. I mean, look, you get to a point where you're in a foot race and maybe the coaching staff is to blame for having guys out of position or whatever. I'm not that nuanced to know what they should have or shouldn't have been doing in those cases. But I do know once you get in a foot race like that, if the other guy's faster, there's just nothing you can do. And I thought that getting some faster guys, which I perceive the kids that were first-year freshmen on that roster to be faster than some of the kids that maybe are playing. Maybe I'm wrong. That's what I thought would have happened by season's end that did not.
Right. And I guess we were, and again, Chris, you're being exposed by a team that 2 weeks ago you were talking about still a chance to play in the playoffs. You're being exposed by that offense. I mean, this is one of the elite. Some think it's the best offense in the country, which it might be. I don't know. I don't think it is. I think it's probably second or third, but it's really, really good. I think USC has the best offense I've seen. But anyway, I don't mean South Carolina. I mean Southern Cal. That's the problem. I don't think, and we don't know this again, which is not privy to everything because we're not at practice, like you said. But it could be, and I'm just going to say a name here. I don't know this. I'm just throwing his name out. Let's take Trudell Berry, for example. We may not know that he has a slight hamstring pull. We may not know that he's already told them, I'm going to transfer after the season. You know, you don't know these things. So you wouldn't put a kid in that you know isn't going to play for you next year. So, I'm not saying he is. I'm pleased to understand. I'm just making an example of what could be because we don't know.
Are you ready for the mailbag?
Let's do it.
All right. The mailbag is sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Okay, I think I'm just going to go in order of which these were asked on the board. Ann Arbordor says, how do you explain the drop-off in performance and effort from the Florida game to the Tennessee game, and who is to blame?
Well, we just kind of talked about it. I think the effort thing was second half only, and it was after that fumbled punt. I think that's when the effort went out the window.
Yeah,
and again,
I agree.
I don't think quitting is a good word. I don't think the kids quit. I think they're demoralized. I think they got their heads down. So you're not playing with any juice. When you are sitting there thinking, I want this over with in my mind. Now, obviously, you don't ever want a player to be that way, but it's human nature, folks. It happens. It happens on every level. You see it every week in college football.
And by the way, give credit where it's due. Tennessee was the team that could have thrown in the towel. You had a couple of players opt out. You had a bad loss last week. You had really lost what you were playing for weeks. It's raining. You got a road trip. It's a holiday weekend. Tennessee could have checked out, and I think you've got to give Josh Heupel a lot of credit for that not happening.
Here's what I think with that, and I thought about it, and I don't know because I wasn't in their locker room, would never want to be in their locker room, but here's what I think happened. I think before that game, when you're getting ready to go out on the field, and any of you that's ever been in a locker room, and I'm not talking about win one for the Gipper type thing, but when Hendon Hooker stood in front of him on his crutches and told how much he loved the guys right before they went out on that field and all that, I guarantee you Hendon Hooker's who addressed that team. So therefore, they're going to play with juice. They got embarrassed. They got their doors blown off by a mediocre South Carolina team the week before. So what do they want to do? Take it out on Vandy. That's their only hope left, to impress the committee if they think they have some strange way to get, which I heard them all talking about they're still going to get in the playoffs the other night. That ain't happening, folks. Anyway, that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Because what I talked about, would they come out flat and we'd have a chance? That'd be like Florida coming out for their 11 o'clock game. But they didn't. They came out and played us just like they played Alabama. And by the time we figured it out, it was too late. There's nothing we can do about it at that point because they got better athletes than we do on that side of the ball for sure. And when they're playing at their A game and we're playing our D game, you get what you get.
Poor Vandy fan 615 says, and a lot of this we have addressed, but I think there's an element of it we have not. The staff and the team made good strides this season and exceeded my expectations. We were at the game Saturday and not surprised, but demoralized by the overwhelming turnout of all fans. Will the lack of fan support plus the lopsided loss against Tennessee hurt recruiting for Vandy and or have a negative effect on the transfer portal, in parentheses, current team members who might enter the portal for next season? Will Vandy administration ever do anything to help this team regain and grow the fan base? Okay, we've talked about the ticketing aspect. Talk about the recruiting and portal aspect of this.
Well, I can speak to it. The portal thing I can't speak to because kids transfer different reasons. They transfer more for playing time than anything, in my opinion. Now, there's some of them that probably transfer because they're not getting money if they think they're supposed to get a lot of money or something. But here's the one that I can definitely speak to. I know 3 kids for sure that are being recruited by Vandy. I know their families, and I know them. Doesn't affect them at all. Kids don't care. They couldn't tell you, okay, it's Monday morning. They could probably tell you, yeah, I know Tennessee won. What was the score? 40-0, 50. They don't know. They don't care. Kids that play at that age, they don't care. Well, I'm not going to Vanderbilt because they got beat by Tennessee and played bad. You know, and they're also not going because we beat Florida the week before. So to me, you're selling that education. You're selling to the parents. You're selling to the city and that type of thing. I don't think it affects it one iota. It's going to affect some of them maybe that are short-sighted, that don't see the big picture that, hey, I can be something. I can build and beat Tennessee. I can go back to those days only 4 years ago when we beat Tennessee 3 years in a row. You know, the last 4 years, Tennessee's average beating us by 25 points. The previous 3 years, we averaged beating them by 19. So it can change fast. Life comes at you fast.
Who You With VU says, how bad do you believe the game plan was? From Section F, it looked like players and coaches were uptight, not a lot of bouncing around and not a lot of looseness. In a previous podcast, you said you can tell how the game will go by how the players acted in the locker room. Do you believe they weren't loose and were too tight?
Well, I mentioned last week that I'd love to be inside of the game Saturday to see how we're going to feel and see how we're going to come in. If we were quiet, if we were tight, then it was going to be what we got Saturday. And it's probably what it was. I don't know. It's probably what it was. There's such a huge range of emotions on your last game. And there's a lot of those kids, at least probably 15 of them, maybe more, that's their last game. And, you know, you never know how a young man feels. You just don't. Senior days are always wacky to me. Sometimes you just get your brains beat out. It's happened at Vanderbilt in basketball a lot. You see guys that just don't perform on senior day for whatever reason, the distractions or whatever. So I think the question of how they approach the game, he may be right. That may be part of it. But it wasn't really going to matter because Tennessee, when you're the better team athletically, it's up to you to execute. If you execute, the other team can't beat you.
Yeah, I was surprised based on being at Tuesday's practice that it didn't go somewhat differently. I mean, look, I've said this from the beginning. If Tennessee comes in and is fired up,
Yeah,
and is playing reasonably well. There's just nothing they can do about it. Tennessee's just got too much talent. That's a really great ball team, with or without some key guys. Maybe not great without Hooker. I mean, we'll see how that goes. But that's a really good ball team that's had a phenomenal season and deserves everything it's got. I think that's a good way to put it. It's more talented than Vanderbilt, even with key guys sitting out. When I went to practice and I saw that was a loose bunch, like I said, when I was there on Tuesday, I'm thinking, this team wants to play that game right now. From that standpoint, I was surprised. And I did get there about an hour and a half early. We check in. The media check-in gate is right over in that intersection between that corner of the football stadium and baseball and basketball. And so for me to get to the press box, I've got to walk through the Tennessee sideline under the stadium to the elevator. It was starting to rain, I think, at that point. But I didn't, and I was kind of looking for it. There were a lot of players that weren't on the field at that point, but I didn't see anything that indicated to me in body language of what I saw with players and coaches that that team was going to mail it in, and that's kind of how it played out.
Yeah, again, I don't think the mailing in came until the second half. I really don't. I don't think the mailing in. I just think that we're not there speed-wise. We can't. When a team is elite on offense like they are, you can't stick with them if you're not. If they're going to execute, you're in trouble. And they executed their game plan. Our game plan wasn't the right game plan in hindsight. It was the right game plan to beat Florida and Kentucky. It wasn't against them. If you want to compare a game that really looks similar to me, Chris, it would be the Kentucky game against Tennessee in Knoxville. They scored 2 field goals. We missed the field goal. Should have had the ball at the 8-yard line. So we had potential to score 10 points in that game maybe the other night. So basically, the Kentucky-Tennessee game in Knoxville, where they just shut down what Kentucky done best, and you can see the athleticism was different. That's the two comparisons to me.
Okay, who you with VU asked another one. Should Swan have come in after the half when everybody under the sun knew Wright wasn't going to get it done? And what do you think about Lee saying Swan came in when they knew the need to throw to win, but already down 35-0? That comment ticked me off on multiple levels and wanted to hear how you two took that statement. Yeah, I heard it. I was there in the press conference. I thought that was an odd comment. By the time it was 35-0, it was too late. I don't think you're going to disagree with me on any of that.
No. And whether it was Swan or Seals, or Dickey, whoever, somebody that can throw the football down the field, stretch the defense, where you can then maybe hand the ball off to Ray where you can get 15 or 20. But I agree. I think we waited too long.
Okay, Door-Fan 6, what are your expectations for next year from a win-loss perspective? And while we were at it, let me pull up the schedule just so you know what you're getting into here. I will read it to you. This is according to FBSschedules.com. All right, let's go through these one by one. Opener with Hawaii here, August the 26th. I mean, I don't know why they shouldn't win that one. Hawaii went 3 and whatever, I believe.
Agree.
Alabama A&M, September the 2nd, win.
Yep.
So that's 2-0. At Wake Forest, I know that Wake had a lot of 4th and 5th and maybe 6th year players. With the COVID stuff, I don't know how many of those guys can or can't come back. But I would think, especially if Hartman's gone, and I want to look that up and see what his situation is.
I think he would be drafted, wouldn't he? I mean, I think he's gone.
You would think. Because that's a big thing to me. Okay, he was a redshirt junior, so he's got another year. Let me see if he's on any NFL draft list.
I don't know that the season ended. Obviously, their season didn't go well down the stretch. They weren't near as good, so I don't know how he played. I didn't follow it.
Yeah, let's see. In NFL mock draft database, I don't know what that is, has got him projected as an undrafted free agent.
Really?
A first round percentage of 0.6%.
That surprises me.
Yeah, I mean he's not a big guy. He's 6'1". Let's see what this has got. Overall rank 460 on one of these. Oh, that's recruiting. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I mean it looks to me like he is maybe a borderline NFL prospect, so maybe they do get him back.
Well, to me, with or without him, it's a 50-50 game.
Well, yeah, maybe I would say with him, it's probably going to tilt more towards Wake.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
Let's see. Wait, here we go. This is from The Athletic. This is October the 27th. This is Manny Navarro of The Athletic, who's an ACC writer. According to our resident draft expert, Dane Brugler, scouts expect Hartman to enter next year's draft. And by the way, draft stuff before the combine and everything this time of year is really, I hate to use the word sketchy because that seems like it is putting aspersions on the guy that covers it, the people who cover it. I think it's there's a lot of variation between now and April. I'll just put it that way. So, yeah. Let's see. All right, let's get back to the schedule.
So let's
at UNLV.
Say that's a nail. So we're 2-1.
Well, let's do this. Let's do wins and losses and maybe 50-50 games, and then we can come back to those. So I'm going to go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I call Wake a 50-50.
Yeah, I will too. So we got 2 wins, a loss, and 50-50. We're going to use that loosely. Maybe it's more like 65-35 or 70-30. I'm going to put Wake in the toss-up category. I'm going to put UNLV in the win category. I'm hoping to make that road trip if I can talk my wife into it. Kentucky here, I'm going to put that into the toss-up category.
Right.
Along with Missouri here.
Sure. They're 50-50.
So it's 3 wins and 3 toss-ups to this point. At Florida, I'm going to put that as a game they're probably going to lose. That's
they're
down
going to get
there.
better and better. I think Napier.
Yeah.
I like Napier. I think because
I do too. I think people are overreacting on his lack of success the first year. I think I've said this. I know I've said it on my SEC podcast. They are perceived as the next program to really worry about, that he's going to have that built back to where it was, and I think they're right. Okay, Ole Miss here. I'm going to put that, since I've already put Florida as a loss, I'm going to put Ole Miss into the more of a toss-up category there. I mean, that's probably one they're gonna lose, but I'll sort that out later. We don't know how Ole Miss is or isn't going to rebuild. And I'm also going to put Auburn into that category. Probably Ole Miss is more of a loss, but we'll sort that out later. At South Carolina right now, I would probably put that as a loss, and probably at Tennessee also would put as a loss. So it looks to me, tell me if you disagree with any of that, by the way.
I have every SEC game, with the exception of Georgia, Florida, as 50-50 or 40-60.
Okay.
That's just the way I look. Because you're not going to, you know how it is when you pick games, you're going to have to a schedule. It's like this year, if you just said we're going to win 2 SEC games, would you have picked Kentucky and Florida?
No. I mean, and there's so much happens in the portal.
Right.
Maybe just handicapping these individually would have been better. But I mean, I will say, I think they're going to win 3 at a minimum. I think they're probably going to lose 4 at a minimum. So it's, anywhere between 4 and 8 wins is where they could settle.
I've got the exact same thing we did this year: 5-7 or 6-6. Because I think, I said before we won an SEC game this year that we would win 2 SEC games next year. Well, we already did that this year, so I'm behind schedule. But no, I just think, and there's just so many variables. It's just fun to guess, but again, you don't know. You next year you could beat Tennessee and lose to Kentucky, so you don't know.
I'm going to guess Vegas is going to put the over-under right around 5 on wins for next year. 4 to 5, maybe 4.5.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So
I agree.
And right now, I'd probably go over, to be honest, depending on what happens between now and then.
Listen, it's only going to get better with the repetition, stacking another good class, and I'm very confident. See, I guess because I was around there so long for 40 years, I can kind of sense when things are going well and sense when things are going off the rails. And I feel very confident that the next 3 to 5 years we're going to be awfully happy at Vanderbilt, including being able to beat Tennessee again. Look, historically we beat Tennessee once every 4.5 years. That's basically the way it happens. So basically, that's just history. That's 100 years of history. That's a pretty good sample size.
VMAT 23, should Vanderbilt reduce the capacity to the stadium by installing chairbacks or renumbering the bleacher seats for them not to be as tiny as they are? Vanderbilt could easily do with 10,000 less seats because there's only going to be 10,000 less visiting fans at this point. Look, I mean, that's going to get solved at least in another way when they redo the stadium, although they could probably go further and, like he said, install chairbacks and make the number even smaller from there.
Yeah, to me, you don't want to go any smaller than 30,000. I think that's what Wake Forest is, right around that. I have no problem with it being 40,000, what it is. You just have to restructure the way you do things with tickets.
Willie 210, what are the top priorities for Coach Clark Lee as the head coach between now and the start of spring practice?
Player retention, number 1. Number 2, recruiting. And number 3, continuing to pound the same message that he's pounded since the day he walked through that door, of how you recruit and have the same message in that entire building. If he's got people on that staff, if he's got people on his ancillary staff, or even people in the other end of the building that don't have the same message he does, they need to be gone. And that's the way it is. You look at everything as a coach. You don't just look at the players and you don't just look at the coaches. You look at all the support staff, everybody that's in that building. You'd be surprised how there can be an influencer that's just hanging around the program.
Okay, Knoxville Door, 1 to 10 scale. How happy are you with this season, and what should expectations be for next season?
Well, for the entire season, I'm happy. I'm at an 8 probably. Felt like we left one on the table at Missouri for sure. But we got one I wasn't sure we'd get against Florida. So, it's 5-7. I thought we'd go 4-8. So I'm happy.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be 3-9. I would also say is an 8. My only caveat is I would have liked to not see them lose 3 games by 50 or more. That did put a damper on things, especially ending with one that way. But I mean, I can't go against what I said before the season. So,
right.
Okay, original Chidor. Facilities aside, is there any specific game or training equipment where Vandy trails our SEC peers? What should we focus on in building and upgrading the non-bricks and mortar side?
Well, no, look, there's, even during the worst of times, there's adequate facilities that a Vanderbilt had that would say as good as a Georgia State who beat Tennessee. In other words, they were as good as that at very worst. And Georgia State went into Knoxville and beat Tennessee. So you have enough there, to keep football players going. Now, the nutrition part was lagging behind. That's been solved. There's some things like Clemson had, some of this latest technology and stuff that Vanderbilt doesn't have, but I don't think that maybe 10 colleges in America have it. So no, we're okay there. That's not the reason you win and lose football games, in my opinion. It's not.
By the way, Vanderbilt has picked up a commitment in the middle of our podcast. Dante Kelly, who was a former Mississippi State commitment. He's a safety, 6'3", 200 pounds, out of Greenwood, Mississippi, rated a 5.5 3-star.
Nice. Can he run? What's his 40
I hope. That I don't know. Yeah, if he can run, he'll play. Let's see. I think that's it. Let me see. Yeah, that's all we've got at the moment. So with that, parting thoughts, I know you had a story to tell, and anything else you want to end with. And by the way, next week, maybe we'll try to look forward with the roster a little bit.
That's great.
In fact, let's see, what is the 5th is when the portal opens. Maybe we'll try to time doing a show a day after the portal, so we'll know a little bit more. Okay. But I think the next thing will be personnel and things like that for next year. But I think I want to wait and do that next week, since we covered so much ground today, and there's so many more unknowns that will get answered next week.
Okay, perfect. I want to end it with this is for all the Vandy fans out there. That'll make you be glad that you're a Vanderbilt fan instead of the other team. I'm leaving as soon as the game's over. I'm leaving, coming down the elevator on the bridge, and I get off of the elevator, and there's one of those Tennessee fans yelling, "Go Big Orange," or something, not directly at me, but right at my ear, where he's obviously doing it where, to be obnoxious. So I just calmly turned to him and said, "Hey, buddy, so you're a UT fan, huh?" "Well, yeah," he said. And he's walking in, I guess he's parked in the same lot I am, because he's walking with me. He's got like probably a 16-year-old boy with him. I said, "Okay, do me a favor." I said, "How long you been a UT fan?" "Oh, my whole life. I said, "Name me 3 starters on Tennessee tonight on offense and 3 on defense." "Well, that's easy. Joe Hilton's the quarterback. Jalen Myatt was a receiver. And that's all he could name on offense." And I said, "What about defense?" "I don't know any of them. They're no good over there. They gave up 63 points last week. I don't know any of their names." So that's the type of fan they got. Just be glad you are who you are.
Luke, appreciate you joining the podcast. We've had a lot of people appreciate your appearances. Those aren't going away. We'll start to transition a little bit more to basketball. But again, we've got some loose ends to wrap up with football, and I look forward to catching those with you.
Thanks, Chris. Enjoyed it, man. And talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk, Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group, and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.